What do you do when your faith system no longer fits? Because sometimes you outgrow it. Sometimes you graduate, you ascend, you leave the old, itchy, worn-out way, and you begin to walk in the new. Sometimes you grow. Join the conversation with me, Tony Werfel, author, speaker, teaching pastor, as we help unwrap and rebuild a faith that no longer fits. We learn to walk into the new, messy journey called life. Hello everyone, and welcome back. I hope you have had just an awesome week. I want to start by saying this. It's just been such an interesting journey the last couple weeks. I have been navigating through this career change from pastor at this OC Grace First Church to the next thing. And I've had so many of you and so many people in the area who've been here just watching. You've been watching some really negative things unfold and my own hurt and pain and all of this. And you've come to me with these words of encouragement. So many of you. And I want to say I so appreciate those texts and those phone calls and emails and all of it. It's been so life-giving. So many of you have reached out with different stories and stories of movement and change or stepping into the new thing. It's just been so good. And so one thing, though, that I have noticed is that people often, I think, more out of anxiety of not knowing what to say, they'll oftentimes say things like, hey, man, it's all part of the plan God has for you, right? Or this is happening for a reason and purpose. Don't give up. And I think all of those people genuinely they're meaning to give encouragement, and I'm happy to get that. And while I understand their heart, I have to say that hasn't been easy to swallow for me. Those words, those phrases of there's a bigger plan. This is happening for a reason. Because in my mind, I'm like, some of the garbage that I've gone through, the political games, the scapegoating, the ad hoc meetings, that was part of the plan for my life designed by the divine. Like, ouch, really? Like, that's the plan? Like, I think I can do a better plan. Because there's a dark side to that, saying that kind of thing. Because if this God truly had a plan for each person's life, gave them a script to follow, and certain things happen for a reason, everything happens for a reason, we'll say, and a purpose, then consider the dark for a minute. Because here's just two statistics, and there's thousands of others. Every 3 seconds, a girl is captured and forced into human trafficking, where she's raped multiple times a day. Yes, sit with that for a second. That happens. Every 6 seconds, a child starves to death. So over 18 million kids are basically dying these slow, painful deaths. That's the plan? The plan that works out for the good? Come on. Because if God truly did order every step, every hair on your head, create a plan for each of your lives, then let's be honest, he really screwed some people over, didn't he? In Jeremiah 29:11, people will oftentimes quote this one. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Plans to prosper you, give you hope, or give you a future. That's the one that, people will give you on the Hallmark cards when things kind of go awry. That was written to a specific tribe of people wanting essentially to be prosperous again. And so Israel, after a time, they actually do get what they want. And they regain power. But here's the question nobody asks about this verse. What about those other tribes that will be destroyed, that are in the way of Israel's own prosperity? Is this God truly that partial that everyone else on the planet is going to experience bad things so that this one tribe can get good things? Everyone else on the planet that's not Jewish is toast? That, again, doesn't sound like a great plan. It's almost as if the narrative is that if you belong to the right team, if you're born into the right tribal group, you believe the right thing, you have the right skin color, then God's going to bless you. This all sounds pretty frustrating, doesn't it? But I think this is where it goes. Israel's God becomes a genie, only grants certain wishes to the tribes he likes. And so God blesses you, determined by the group you join. It all seems really myopic. And so I would say another issue that actually comes into this, when I believe certain things happen for a reason, that there's this higher purpose to my pain and all these things, that life is somehow scripted, is this question. If life is scripted, and we're essentially these puppets that are playing the part by the great puppet master, what if I make a mistake? Right? It's like as if this Bob Barker game show God shows you 3 doors. One of these doors will be the right door, the one with blessings, and if you follow the script and it all works out perfectly, then you're good. But what if you choose the wrong door? Like, oops, you picked door 3. It was door 2. And what does our guest get? How about a job layoff? Or maybe accompanied by painful sores and the loss of hearing? I don't know. Come on down. The whole thing to me, it begins to be a little bit laughable. But I think also pretty destructive. You can go all sorts of ways with this. Because a God whose plan involves death and brokenness, rape, abuse, starvation, doesn't seem very compelling. So I want to ask you a question, and one that it may seem pretty difficult to swallow at first. What if there is no specific, perfect outline script for your life? And by that I mean, what if your life doesn't actually have a set route, a specific employment or partner or plan, etc.? What if your life is actually wildly dangerous and unpredictable? Kind of like the world we live in. Let me get nerdy with you for a minute. Physics, it gives us all kinds of interesting ways to view the world. So when considering randomness, one of my favorite physicists, he says this: if the system you're looking at is isolated, eventually that system will randomize up to the extent that there's no structure. So basically, there's a structure. A person is in motion. And so eventually there'll be some kind of disorder is going to come into the picture, some sort of chaos. And the chaos or randomness is going to bring with it a new kind of degree of order. That's the idea here. So essentially what the physicist is describing is life. Some call this non-equilibrium process, but there is order for a time, and then bam, again, you lose your job because the company just got sold and you didn't know about it, and maybe it happened last minute, but now there's chaos. And you didn't really have much control of it. It was a random thing. It just happened. You took the job. You didn't know these things were coming. It just happened. But as you look for a new workplace, eventually you'll find a new sense of order and you'll begin again. And so physics says that when energy is imposed into a system that's random, like life in general, new order and new life begins. But there is random everywhere. It's just life. Life is filled with random things. And eventually those random things will create patterns, and you'll walk in that pattern for a time. And then you get randomness and chaos again. Think about the natural world with all these random shakes and winds and enormous waves and all these things. These oftentimes, these random natural movements, they send force and energy into the world, which will in time bring new patterns, new change, new growth, new structures. And so for all of this to take place, we have to understand it starts with random. There's energy that's expanded and it stutters and it moves, and then patterns are formed. And only after a time that they're formed and you live in the pattern for a bit, after a time, it'll be broken down and then rebuilt again. This sounds an awful lot again like life. And so for many of us, we grew up though with this narrative that said God has made a specific plan and order for your life. And some of us were told there's a specific partner just for you, right? There's a specific job. You got to be a doctor. And some of us, we didn't do well in medical school. And so, oh no, what do you do? There's a specific kind of life that's already planned. And we'll go even further sometimes and we'll look at natural disasters or the unnatural. And we'll say, well, there's a plan to this. Just wait. Just trust the plan. This thing has a purpose. But the problem with this, if this was the plan, that you got cancer, lost a loved one to a violent shooting, you got crucified at a job because certain people didn't like the ideas you had. If that's the plan, I've got to say, the architect is a pretty poor one. If this is all part of a plan, then I've got to say, I think there are educated people around me today that could probably do a better job if that's how the thing works. And again, I say this in tongue in cheek, of course, but I'm personally beginning to see that life isn't about a certain specific plan that somehow follows the specific road that's going to lead me to some specific outcome. Because that's really pretty westernized thinking, if you ask me. Because here in the West, we look at life as a journey of arriving somewhere. It's about attaining the goal. And so whatever your goal is, whether it's heaven or a bunch of money or whatever. And so we attribute purpose to our suffering and pain and accidents, natural or unnatural disasters, because it'll eventually, we believe in the back of our minds, bring us to that destination. But the problem with that is that life doesn't work that way. There is randomness all around us. One of my favorite philosophers, Alan Watts, he gives this great metaphor for life. He says, life is not a journey to a destination. It's not. He says, life is a music composition that you learn to dance to. Some of you are going to think about this, you're going to sit with it, and later you're going to be like, oh my goodness, that's it. That makes sense. Because with music, you're not focused on getting to the end. Because if that was the case, all the greatest songs would only be a couple measures, right? But that's not the case. In great music, you have rise and falls and the deep bass and the high shrill notes and the voices. You've got choruses and verses and bridges, and they sometimes repeat and build and slow and resolve, only to be picked back up again. And for the dancer or the listener listening to the music, the composition, we learn to listen to the unexpected notes. We wince sometimes and we laugh and we cry with emotions at other times. And so we learn to move and step to the music as it carries us. Come on. We aren't focused on the end. We're allowing ourselves to dance and learn new songs. So what if life is not a written plan and things don't happen for a reason because Game Show God up there is giving you certain doors and pray you choose the right one or you're toast? What if the reality is you and I are composers and we find meaning and purpose there? We move through this life creating scores with elements and notes that we experience. And when we run into something painful, what if we use it to sharpen our song? We take it and we create powerful meaning and learning and use it for the next stanza. And as we compose, we're dancing with it. We're moving to its beat. We're finding meaning. Not assuming it happened for a reason, but simply admitting the note showed up. The thing happened. The bass note hit randomly. And you weren't expecting the crash to sound like that, were you? But you go with it and you learn from it. Aristotle said the nature of an object determines how it moves. So our nature, the core of our being, is dynamic, and we grow and evolve. Like music composition, we're in progress, we're in process. And so, all my friends out there, my hope for you and me is that in these moments of pain, discomfort, change, movement, growth, we won't simply say, well, it happened for a reason, and we'll blame it on God or the plan. But my hope is that we'll begin saying, I'm going to navigate these random things, these things that just show up, these things that are just part of life. I'm going to navigate those things with grace. You take the random note, you learn from it, and then add it to your musical score. Then you dance with it. And I think when we do this, that's when we find real meaning. That was fun. And as always, if you found this helpful, please share it on your social media platforms. And please, now more than ever, go to my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/Tony Werfel, WUERFEL, and give a one-time donation or monthly, whatever you can do. It can be as small as $2 or as large as you like to give. Either way, it's helpful. I hope you will learn to dance to the beautiful music that's before you. Blessings, everyone, and I'll talk to you next week. Bye.